welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. I have done some videos like this in the past, but I haven't done one recently. So I went and got myself some mystery, like blind date with book boxes. And this one, it was so good. I literally finished it in 2 days. The theme of it when I got it was dark horror. This book, Brother by Ania Ahlborn. And I just wanted to talk about it. So I'm going to do the first half of this video is going to be like non-spoilers, so just general. And then I'll tell you, at this point, I'm just going to talk about the book and all of it. And if you want to, go and read it, then stop watching. Anyway, so I'll read the back first so you know what the book is about. Um, Deep in the heart of the Appalachia stands a crooked farmhouse miles from any road. The Morrows keep to themselves, and it served them well so far. When girls go missing off the side of the highway, the cops don't knock on their door, which is a good thing, seeing as to what's buried in the Morrows' backyard. But 19-year-old Michael Morrow isn't like the rest of his family. He doesn't take pleasure in the screams that echo through the trees. Michael pines for normalcy, and he's sure that someday he'll see the world beyond West Virginia. When he meets Alice, a pretty girl working at a record shop in the small nearby town of Dahlia, he's immediately smitten. For a moment, he nearly forgets about the monster he's become. But his brother, Rebel, is all too eager to remind Michael of his place. So this book is told from two perspectives, which is really interesting throughout. The first one is in the present and it is told from Michael's perspective. And it switches off every other chapter. The second perspective is told from the past, and it is Rebel's perspective of what's happening in the family. Basically, it's a family of people who are just murdering young women. Uh, the family consists of the dad. Nobody in the family seems to call him dad, though. They all call him Wade. Like, nobody calls him Pop, nothing. It's just Wade. That is Wade. And then there's the mom, who everyone calls Mama, except for Rebel. He calls her Claudine because that's her name. And she's kind of like the spearhead for all of this. She's absolutely nasty. So it's mentioned throughout that the girls that Claudine really likes are girls that resemble her when she was younger, which is kind of creepy. And there are two main kind of types of girls that these people go after. They go after the easy ones, the hitchhikers, and then they have what they call our marks, who they stalk and learn their routines, and then they kidnap them. Anyway, so mom and dad. Then they have the oldest sister, Laurelyn, who you do not see in the books. She is only in the past talkings through Rebel. She is never in the current present talks with Michael, which is interesting. And then comes Rebel, who is the first boy. You can really see his just absolute descent into madness throughout the books. It's really interesting. His real name is Ray, but I guess he makes them call him Rebel. And he really tries to run the show. He tries to challenge the mom and dad a lot. And then you have the younger sister, Missy Dawn. And then you have the youngest, Michael, who you find out within the first couple of chapters, Michael is actually adopted. Apparently, and within the first couple of chapters, you learn this, Rebel saw him outside and they kidnap him. And then they brainwash him by telling him that his parents didn't actually want him and he would have died in the forest if it wasn't for him because they abandoned him. And then you have Michael, who this is about. And honestly, Michael is just as bad, if not worse, than the whole rest of the family. The only people that I can say that don't really have a hand in any of it would be the two girls. And they just lead absolutely miserable lives. But Michael, because it's told from his perspective, it almost seems like he's trying to be like, I'm a good guy, but he is not a good guy. Like, not at all. I would argue that he is, like I was saying, he's worse than the rest of his family. Anyway, there are some kind of warnings that I do need to talk about because we'll be going into kind of some of the stuff for the book. It is a dark horror, so obviously there's going to be people getting murdered. There's rape throughout it. The author does a really great job of letting you know what's happening without being too graphic. There was no point in this book where I was like, I have to put this down for a little bit. And I've had that with other dark horror books where they've just been so grotesque that I like The Black Farm. I read that book and I was like, okay, every like little bit I was like, I have to go take a break, go outside, watch a comedy, So they do a really good job of this book being really good, really graphic, but not too in depth. There's a theme throughout of incest, which I'll go over some more when we go into the more in depth. But there's also just some I felt like it was kind of unnecessary like language throughout it too. The brother in particular calls his younger brother some names that I'm just like, you probably could have left that out of the book and it would have still been like a really good book, could have had to say something else. There's just and I don't know when this book was published, but like especially nowadays there's just some stuff that's just kind of like, it's just a little, you know I don't know, it's just a little grimy a bit. I will say there is only one point in the books where I actually feel bad for Michael, and that's when he's 4. And that is the only time that I'm ever like, "Oh man, this poor kid." And that was when they kidnapped him, because I was like, they just ruined that 4-year-old's life. Ruined it. So in the book, there are kind of 3 main mysteries that are throughout the book that you learn kind of one after the other as the book goes on. I want to say, if I'm remembering it correctly, that you don't really start learning them though until like the middle of the book. So they are like true, like you're literally wondering these things as it goes on. The first one is what happened to Liliana, because something had to happen to her with this family and the fact that she's not around in the present anymore. Why? What they're doing with the bodies, because in the very first chapter, it's described that they have this storm cellar. And when Rebel, Wade, and Claudine are done killing the girl, Claudine, the mom, calls for Michael, and Michael takes her down to the storm cellar. And you're like, they're not just like burying them, they're doing something with the dead people. So that's another like kind of mystery that you have to work out, is what are they doing with the dead people? And why is Michael so afraid of Rebel? Because throughout this, like, he is more afraid of Rebel than he is afraid of Wade and Claudine. And Claudine is absolutely ruthless, especially to the girls, to Liliana and Misty Dawn in like the past and the present with Misty Dawn. Anything they do and they get beat for it. The boys, she doesn't touch at all. So it's kind of like, but those are kind of like the 3 main mysteries surrounding what's going on in the book. The first thing that popped in my head was, what are they doing with the bodies? I had a ton of theories. And yeah, and I even did point out, like, with the feeling bad for Michael thing, like, after that one point in the book, you're just like, unfortunately, he is a product of his environment, but there are some things that he chooses to do, which is why I think he's worse than the rest of the family, that the rest of the family don't do, you know? So as I was saying with Rebel, like, he becomes way more twisted as the books go on, and you get more perspective on things as well and what he's kind of done. By the time he turns 13, he is a full-blown alcoholic. Wade even gives him on his 13th birthday a huge thing of alcohol, so he'll stop stealing his stash. And that's kind of something that him and Michael do all the time, is he'll take Michael, because Michael is described as being a lot taller than Rebel and a lot faster than Rebel. And Rebel will take him to faraway gas stations, and Michael will steal alcohol for him, and then they'll like drive off, which they do have money. Like, there are points in the thing where they have no problem paying for things, and I'm not sure how they get their money. I'm not sure if they're just stealing it off the dead bodies and they just kind of are really good at, keeping it budgeting. I'm not sure. It sounds weird to be like, oh, these people are great at budgeting with these dead people's money. But at no point do they work like regular jobs. Like, and Wade inherited the house from his parents. So, they don't have to pay bills on it, but it's strange. Maybe it's just because they're out like way far in the Appalachian and no one's really like paying attention to them. They can just kind of do what they want. They do forage a lot. Um, like Michael, it said in like flashbacks, Michael used to hunt all the time for the family. But like, and they do they're thieves. They're definitely thieves. So anything that they really need, like for the cars or anything like that, they go and they steal. But like, still, they pay for things. Where are they getting the money from? And that was never quite answered. I'm pretty sure they're just stealing it from the dead people though, and are just like insanely good budgeters. Okay, I kind of had to go through my notes a little bit because I wanted to make sure I hadn't said everything I wanted to say before we get into the spoilers. So now is where I'm going to kind of get into the spoilers of the book. So if you want to read, I would highly recommend reading this book. So if you want to read this book, definitely clock off from now, because now I'm just going to say everything that happens. Um, so as the books progress, Rebel, like I said, just becomes more twisted and more twisted. And you find out not only does he like stalk people, but he likes to get to know them personally before like raping and murdering them, which is awful. Like Claudine and Wade have rules because they don't want to get caught. You know, they pick people who nobody's gonna miss. The people who, you know, the hitchhikers or the runaways, you know, the people that they know nobody else is going to connect them to. Rebel doesn't seem to care. So in the book, there's this separate kind of, and it's not even really, it's kind of a plot point because it does become major later on, but for the vast majority of the book, it's just kind of like an afterthought because most of it is between Michael and Rebel and like the family and stuff. But Michael and Rebel have been going into town and seeing these two girls. Rebel has been dating this girl named Lucy, who bears a striking resemblance to all the girls in their family. They have all the same hair color, which it should have been a red flag for Michael. And then Michael has been seeing her best friend, Alice, who is, I think, like a year younger than Michael. So she's only 18. Um, and like, I don't understand Michael, to be honest, in these books, because they keep calling him dumb throughout it. Like Rebel really points out how stupid he is, and Michael like obviously believes and says, "Oh, Rebel's right; he's way smarter than me." But I honestly think that that might be true. Michael is really stupid throughout the books because he goes with Rebel when Rebel like stalks these women and he gets to know them, and like he sees what Rebel is all about. So I do not understand why he wouldn't see Lucy and immediately clock that Rebel isn't actually interested in her. He just wants to kill her. And from the moment that Michael meets Alice, it's described as him being just absolutely head over heels for her. And he gets like really uncomfortable. Because, you know, obviously she's the first woman that he's ever spoke to like that. And I don't understand how Michael couldn't immediately clock seeing Lucy, knowing that that's the ideal type that they try to hunt, and not immediately know that he's going to end up killing Lucy. And then at that point, you have to think like, oh, you know, maybe I shouldn't get emotionally attached to this other woman that Lucy's with. I don't know. There were just so many moments in the book where Michael could have been way better. Um, and just he does this self-pity thing throughout the books because he's convinced himself that these people have saved him, and so he has to pay them back, which doesn't make any sense at all. It almost feels like he tried to convince himself so hard that he wasn't like them, he wasn't a bad guy, but he is exactly like them. So it's just, yeah, I don't know, but Rebel just, he is a whole nother beast. You can obviously tell throughout the whole thing, like I was saying, like in the past things, that Rebel was absolutely in love with his older sister Laurelyn in a like weird possessive way. So the way that they actually get Michael in the books is Laurelyn is talking to Rebel and she says that she wants to be a school teacher, that she really loves, she used to read to all of them. She really loves reading to all of them. You know, she loves doing that. And Rebel's like, how are you going to do that without an education? None of these four children have ever gone to school. They learned how to read, you know, from home by themselves. Like Laurelyn kind of tries to half teach them. So Laurelyn tells Rebel, like, oh, I want to, be a vet. I want to be a teacher. Why can't I be both? I want to go to school. And Rebel immediately in his brain is like, I can't have her leave because she needs to stay here with me. She can't leave me. And he goes out in the middle of the night and he takes their dog and he kills the dog. And then he convinces his dad, Wade, the next day to go out, and that's when he sees Michael. And he's like, I want that one. And he picks Michael, and he brings Michael back, and he tells Laura Lynn, he goes, hey, I got this for you. You have somebody who you can teach now. And then he does that so that she won't leave him. And then he gets mad because Laura Lynn becomes super attached to Michael. There's this whole scene where apparently the family goes out during the fair and goes and has a nice time every year at the fair. And it is one of the only times that the girls are allowed to leave the house and like the yard area. The boys, Michael and Rebel go out wherever they want to. They go out to the movies with like Alice and Lucy later in the story. They go out, and obviously they're out hunting people, but they also go into town. The girls aren't allowed to go anywhere, it's revealed. Misty Dawn in particular, she is just so tragic. The girl loves music, she loves fashion, she's a typical girly. She does have a weird thing for Michael because, he's the only male around her who she knows she isn't blood related to. So how can you really blame her? Her mom beats her all the time. She wants some form of comfort, but at the same time, Michael's not reciprocative to it at all. He fully sees Misty Dawn as his sister. It's just tragic. It's just all over tragic. I think I lost my train of thought there. So the first mystery that they reveal to you is about what they're doing to these women. They're eating them. Yeah. Michael takes them down to the storm cellar once he's done. And because Wade had taught him how to hunt and how to field dress, he also makes Michael field dress the women, which I think it was saying that Michael was really young when he first started having to do this. I can't quite remember what age he was. But he basically did it by locking him in the storm cellar and telling him he wasn't allowed to come out until he did it. So he prepares all the meat for the women. He gets rid of the bodies. He cleans everything. Michael cleans up their messes all the time. And then he gives the meat to Claudine, and Claudine cooks it for them. But Michael takes it a step further. Michael, because he's all down alone in the storm cellar, he closes the door. There's nobody down there with him. Michael rapes the dead bodies before he disposes of them if there's a particular one that he takes a fancy to. So that's why I think he's a little bit worse than all the other ones. Because he does necrophilia on their corpses. And it's weird because when he's carrying them down the stairs, he describes how he tries to do it as respectfully as possible. He tries to be as nice to these women as possible. He dropped one and he felt really bad about dropping her corpse down the stairs because he tries to keep them as intact as possible to give them dignity in death. But then you're going to go and rape them once you get them down there? Like, what? And then it gets even creepier throughout the books because at one point, because he's obsessed with Alice, he starts starting to like envision them as Alice, kind of. And there's one woman in particular who Rebel stalks for a year. For a year, he stalks this woman, and then he has Michael come and help and get her. And then Michael takes her down to the basement. And luckily, he didn't rape that woman. She's kind of an older woman, and he got like grossed out somehow. I don't remember what happened, but he got grossed out. He had like the vision of Alice in his head dead. The first time he kissed Alice too, he imagined her dead as well. So luckily he doesn't rape that woman because, as it turns out, like I said, incest is a huge thing in this thing. That woman was Michael's birth mom. So Rebel does this whole revenge arc on Michael that you find out is because Loreline, the parents killed her. Like, we already knew that. I kind of guessed that. Like, it wasn't that huge of a mystery. But Rebel blames it on Michael. And it's because when Michael was a kid, he used to have to hunt for the family and he was having a really bad dry spell. And Laurelyn used to keep bunnies. So Michael one night, and Rebel watched him do it. Michael one night released all the bunnies, grabbed one, took it out in the woods, killed it, field dressed it, And then Laurelyn was distraught at her bunnies being dead. Rebel didn't do anything about this because he thought what was going to happen was he was going to comfort his older sister in her time of need. But no, what actually happened was because Michael brought the rabbit for dinner that night, the mom served it whole. And I think it's because the mom was just an absolute awful person. And she knew that her bunnies had gone missing. And she was like, I'm going to serve this whole rabbit to my dinner to eat. Loreline flipped out, called her mom a bitch. And that's when Claudine killed her. Like, Wade had all the other kids go back upstairs. And Rebel was like, oh no, she's going to get beat really hard. Rebel even said how confused he was because usually Laurelyn just cries silently and doesn't like scream or cry when she's getting beaten. But that night she was screaming. And then Rebel sees Wade later in the night carrying Laurelyn's dead body out into the woods to bury her. And that's when Rebel realizes that they killed her. And that is when Rebel stops calling them mom and dad. That's when he starts calling them Wade and Claudine and decided he wanted to change his name. And this all happened before he became the alcoholic, too. He became the alcoholic shortly after. So this is happening before Rebel's even 13 years old. And he pins all the blame on Michael, young, terrified Michael. And the next day, they tell everybody that Laurelyn went to visit the grandparents and she's living with the grandparents now. She just packed up and left. And Rebel was mad because they didn't tell the truth. And that's like a huge thing in this family. You have to tell the truth. You have to tell the truth. It was kind of insane. But so he pins all the blame on Michael and he does this long con where he makes Michael, like that woman from before, Michael field dresser. So Michael literally chopped up his own mom. And then the women that they were getting attached to, Lucy and Alice, yeah, it turns out Alice is actually his younger sister. That was her mom too. So like I was saying, there's this theme. See, incest is a common theme throughout the whole book. Claudine is raped by her father. Laura Lynn is raped by the same man, her grandfather in it. Rebel is in love with Laurelyn, his own sister. Misty Dawn was in love with Michael, and I know that's not technically incest because they're not related, but they still grew up together. Like Michael was with them since he was 4, so it is still kind of incesty. They call each other brother and sister. It's there. And then Michael is in love with Alice, who turns out to be his sister. And he has this moment of like being in anguish because he realizes that Alice is his sister. He's killed his mom. He's never going to be able to get with the girl. Kind of breaks down a bit. And that's towards the end of the book. But what I want to know is, and I had this thought, like, how did Michael and Misty Dawn not realize that Lauren had died, especially after, so Misty Dawn gets killed by the mom because Rebel turns her in for trying to seduce Michael, which apparently is this huge horrible thing that is worthy of being killed for. But the problem is I think she got backed into a corner and it was like they were either going to kill her or Michael, and she was in love with Michael and she didn't want Michael to die, so she again called her mom a bitch, which is the way to go. And then her mom kills her, and I just don't understand how Michael didn't realize until Rebel had to flat tell him to his face that Loreline was killed by their parents, you know? And it wasn't even like Rebel even had this super weird ambiguous conversation about it too, because after Misty Dawn died, they went into town to try and go and talk to the girls, and Michael tries to he tries to persuade him to go somewhere else, and he's like, why don't we just go to North Carolina, we'll pick up Laura Lynn. And Rebel does some weird ambiguous thing about her being the same as Misty Dawn and everything, and Michael still doesn't get it. Like, he doesn't pick things up. And Rebel at this point, when they're in the car, also tells them about how Claudine used to be raped by her dad. And it's at that point, they're driving to the girls, and at this point, Michael was going to warn Alice and tell her, you need to get out of here and go. You and Lucy need to go. He's a bad guy. But after he finds out about his mom, Claudine, he suddenly starts viewing Claudine as a victim in all of this, even though she's murdering like tons of young women. He sees her as a victim, and he for some reason can't bring himself to tell Alice anymore about warning her about Rebel. He just goes, "Oh, you should really go. You know how you said you wanted to leave this town? You should really go." And then he kisses her, which is really gross. Um, but then he kisses her. At that point, he didn't know she was his sister, though. I guess I should have done this in chronological order, but I'm kind of just, oh, I just finished the book, so I'm hyped about everything. But, like, you know your brother, you know your family. What did you think was going to happen? His birthday comes up, and of course, they've got the girls duct taped there. And this is why I also think that Michael just, he's not as stupid as he seems, and he knows that everything's happening. And I think in a weird way, he kind of wanted it to happen because there's a point where Rebel mentions how they could bring the women into the fold. And Michael immediately knows Lucy is not being brought into the fold, not with her looks. Like he even says, like he even thinks it in his own brain. He's like, she looks exactly like our mom. Our mom will not be able to stop herself from killing her. But he does have the thought that Alice could be brought into the fold, and that's who he really cares about. So Michael's birthday comes around. Rebel had kidnapped the girls and brings them there, and he realizes because he was visiting Misty Dawn's grave. And then he comes back and he's horrified. They're both there. Wade's got a hold of Alice. Lucy is tied to a chair. And Rebel makes Michael kill Lucy to spare Alice. They tell him, they're like, look, you know, we have to kill Lucy. She's our type. What are you going to do? And you have to prove yourself to the family since you wanted to leave. And they tell him, though, they're like, but Alice, will spare Alice for you, and we will tie her down in the storm cellar. And, you know, she's mad at you right now, but eventually she'll come around, right? So Michael kills Lucy. Um, there are several points in the book where Michael says that because of like how he's lived and hunting and everything, he knows how to kill somebody quickly, where they'll drain out in seconds, he says. So I want to know why he kills Lucy in a horrible fashion. He stabs her in the abdomen over and over and over again until she dies. And he knows she's screaming and crying out in pain. So it's like, why? They didn't tell him how he had to kill Lucy. They just told him he had to kill Lucy and gave him a knife. Like, why would he make it as painful and horrific as possible if he wasn't just like them? And you can kind of see it in the books too. Like when it gets brought up, him leaving, it's only him and Alice. It's him and Alice all the way. Lucy, he does not care for at all. He doesn't care about Lucy. He doesn't care what happens to her. He doesn't care anything about her. So it's just a little weird. This all culminates in Rebel handing over the keys to the car and a map that leads him back to that woman's house that they had previously killed and murdered. And this is where Michael learns that she was his mom, that he killed and ate. And it didn't gloss over the fact that he almost raped her, but I mean, you know, probably his brain couldn't handle it at that point. But yeah, he killed and ate his own mom. He had second helpings of her, in fact. But when he gets there, there's all these photos, there's all these, you know, mementos to a lost child. He can see the children in the photos, he can see the progression, and he sees where it stops mysteriously right around the time the child was 4. Oh, there's no more pictures of the little boy. And, like, you know, there's shrines dedicated to him. And it isn't until he finds a note from Rebel saying, like, welcome home, and then, you know, he still doesn't get it, and then he finds another note, and like that he had to be told point blank, like, this is your mom, you killed your mom. And then he goes out and he like vomits, because he also finds out at that point, you know, Alice is his sister. And then he goes back to the farmhouse and he kills Wade and Claudine in their sleep. Claudine had kind of woken up because he killed Wade first, and I don't know. They had a little bit of an exchange. It didn't really matter. These people don't really matter in the books. They're just like told as some scary people who you don't like cross with. Like, but it's really a book about Michael and Rebel. And then that's when he faces off with Rebel with Alice down in the storm cellar. They're all down there. And Rebel, like, point blank tells him what happens to Lorelyn and why it was his fault and like all this stuff. And then Michael kills Rebel, not before Rebel, you know, gets him in the thigh or something like that. And then he turns to go and get Alice out of there, and he realizes that she's ran away. Me personally, if it was me and two guys were fighting down in a storm cellar, I mean, sure, she was stabbed. She was kind of bleeding out through her abdomen, so maybe she couldn't close the storm doors, but I would try to fucking close those fuckers in and lock them up, you know? But she's running down the road. Michael easily catches up to her and he just can't understand. He starts getting really frustrated with her. He can't understand why she's not accepting his apology. And she knows cuz Rebel told her that they also killed her mom and ate her. Um and so he's killed her best friend, he kills her mom. They're the only two people she has in her entire like life. And he just can't understand why she doesn't accept his apology, why she doesn't realize he's sorry. What? And so Alice stabs Michael, and then the end scene is like her running to the Delta, and she's like barely making it. Like she's like bleeding out of her stomach. And then as soon as she reaches the Delta, the very end is where Michael goes, he thinks in his brain, fuck, I have the car keys on me. So she can't even escape. I mean, she just bleeds to death. It's implied, and I thought that was a beautiful ending. Everybody died. It was great. I know I got a little bit disjointed there because I got really excited talking about everything. But this was a really, really good book. And considering the fact that I got it in a little mystery thing for only $8, that was a very good read. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.